Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hey, comics fam, short and sweet here. We have a Patreon, so if you want to help us keep the lights on and spread the good word, you can drop a small tithe in the offering plate at Cryptid Creator Corner Pod over there. Membership starts at $1 per month, and we've got some great extra footage from the podcast dropping soon over there. Link in the show notes, and thank you for your continued support.
Thanks for your donation.
Let's face it, the comics landscape is a mess right now. I'm the editor-in-chief of a comics journalism outlet, and I can't even keep track of it all. If you are as passionate as I am about indie comics and its creators, you should check out the Lantern Guide. Created on the premise of creating light in the dark, it's going to be the go-to resource to keep you up to date on the projects and the creators that you love. Don't take my word for it. I reached out to my friend Brian Lovell, Poison Ivy artist and indie comics creator, to get his take. Brian, what does the Lantern Project fix?
I'm a dude who loves indie comics, and I know personally, I get very frustrated when something shows up in my social media timeline or something like that, and I feel like I can't keep track of everything. So really, the Lantern Project was born out of that. It was an opportunity for me as a reader to kind of have a place to want to consolidate all the stuff that I wanted to read, all the cool projects from cool creators that seemed interesting and kind of unique to something that I would like, which is really not super represented everywhere else, but it's all over the indies. Having a spot to go to that felt like it consolidated a lot of those audiences and a lot of those places where I couldn't just get drowned out in the feed of social media seemed really valuable to me.
What's the ultimate goal?
It's really our hope with this project that creators feel like they're able to get in front of readers, and readers are able to get books that they actually want to read with a much easier time of keeping track of them and accessing them.
Catalog is scheduled for a quarterly release, so head over to thelanterncatalog.com to sign up now so you don't miss your next favorite thing. I'll put a link in the show notes for you.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Yeti's Cryptid Creator Corner. I am one of your hosts, Jimmy Gasparo, and we are having some special episodes for March. We're doing a Marvel March featuring creators who are working on current Marvel comic books. And I have a very special guest today that I am excited to talk to. He is a journalist and a writer. He has covered the War on Terror and many other issues throughout his career as a journalist. He's written the book Reign of Terror, How the 9/11 Era Destabilized America and Produced Trump. He's done a lot of articles that I have read, and we'll share some in the show notes. But he is currently the writer for Iron Man. As we record this, issues 1 through 4 are already out. Issue 5 comes out February 25th. And issue 6 on March 12th is, I think, the Insurgent Iron Man. It's starting like a brand new jumping on point for readers if you're not into Iron Man. But I've read the first 4 issues of this gentleman's run, and it is phenomenal. I can't wait to talk about it. But please welcome to the podcast, Spencer Ackerman. Spencer, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, thanks very much, Jimmy. That was really very kind intro.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, so listeners of this podcast know, because we cover a lot of indie comics, and in particular, I've not read a bunch of Marvel comics. Marvel has always been like a blind spot for me, not really for any particular reason. I guess as a kid, I was always more of like a DC person, and then when I got back into comics, I just hadn't gotten around to reading a lot of Marvel. And I've been trying to do better about that, especially when I have a lot of guests come on and we start talking about, hey, how did you get into comics? And the X-Men comes up all the time, and so many different Marvel characters. And I'm, familiar with them from the Marvel films, but I haven't read a lot of the actual books. And I thought this was a great excuse to have folks working on the comics now and to start reading them. As we record this, I already talked to David Pepos and started reading his cable run that's out right now, which I thought was fantastic. And so I don't have a lot of the, not necessarily baggage, but knowledge of current continuity. I just jumped in Iron Man #1. I read your issues, 1 through 4, and it's with Julius Ohta is doing the art.
Oh, twi, yeah.
Um, Otwa. Okay, I apologize. And I think Alex Sinclair
Yeah,
is
the legend.
coloring, and yes, incredible. And Joe Caramagna, who's
Mhm.
uh, been on the podcast recently, is lettering. I was like, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised because this has happened a number of times. I was just so uh, drawn in to the world that you have created in terms of Iron Man. I didn't feel lost. I really was given just enough of, exposition to kind of get what was going on. I loved the interplay of, you know, Tony having to deal with essentially a hostile takeover somewhat of his company. I mean, I loved it. And it was funnier than I thought it was going to be as well. There were like a couple of moments, especially Tony dealing with uh, I guess what is it? The Iron GPT,
Yes,
his
thank you,
like
yeah. I
his
was a big
on foot AI.
Yeah, I especially wanted to have a running gag, in the year of, in the year of our Lord 2025, that Tony Stark has built, an AI that sucks, and,
Yeah.
you know, uh, we're recording this in late January, right as, news of China's DeepSeek AI has thrown Silicon Valley into absolute chaos and abject financial disarray. And you can believe that as soon as I learned about DeepSeek, I was thinking to myself, like, I need to get a gag in there about Tony threatening to replace Iron GPT with a Chinese AI.
I just the fact the I mean, not to spoil anything, but these 4 issues are out. Just a little thing. The fact that it keeps referring to him as username,
Thank you.
I mean, just I love that every single time it happened. And I mean, I've read a bunch of DC comics, and so I've read, Big 2 stuff and familiar with it. But like, one of the things I really like enjoyed about it was, you know, Tony's essentially just gotten back into the company, trying, and instantly there's a board meeting, and Tony still is approaching this like these are, these other companies, Roxxon and AIM are bad guys, and like they're the enemy and he has to stop them. And it's, the first issue sets up that, like, well, it's a board vote. You just have a seat on the board. Like it was really laid out like um, you know, a run of the mill type of one company buying another. And it wasn't dry at all though. Like I was like riveted in these boardroom scenes.
Thank you.
I think that is, a credit, to your writing, but also Julius's art
Oh yeah.
is so good. And yeah, you mentioned Alex Sinclair. I mean, the colors are amazing, especially when we do have some of the fights when Force shows up and Ironmonger. Yeah, there's just some things in it that are, you still have those big, you know battles. And yeah, I thought it was great. But so I wanted to ask you, when the different things you've written, um and your career as a journalist is, I mean, Pulitzer Prize winning. It's
Thank you.
incredible with the work that you've done. And even, I do a little bit of research, so I was on Forever Wars and reading some of the recent stuff that you and posted on there, which is, I think, your newsletter, and kind of operates as a journalistic blog as well. So when you are kind of get an opportunity to pitch stories for Iron Man, like, was it easy for you to figure out, like, all right, this is where he was, this is what I want to do with it, or did you have a bunch of things swirling around when you thought of the direction you could take this?
So I was buying Iron Man in floppies when Jerry Duggan was writing the book. So I was sort of locked in on where the character was in current continuity. Not a character I thought I would be writing, certainly not right after Jerry, and now concurrently with Jerry because he's writing West Coast Avengers, which is a real fun book, and also using Iron Man. Um, I had when I was approached by the editor on the book, Sarah Brunstad, to pitch for it. um, she had a certain concept, a kind of like a brief synopsis of what she thought would be interesting for the book to kind of gravitate around. And you mentioned Ryan, who will be on this podcast, so not to steal his thunder and only to give him a bunch of shine. They let me know that Ryan was doing this One World Under Doom crossover, and I immediately wanted to play in that. Get ready for an incredible, uh I don't know if it's quite line wide, but nearly line wide, less crossover and more status quo, that's going to be Doctor Doom centric in 2025, and raising a lot of very serious questions of why people would flock to Doctor Doom, and why people would think that Doom is doing a superior job than our Marvel superheroes are. Um, and you'll see in our sixth issue, which will be out in March, how Iron Man is going to be reacting to this. And that was the germ of the story. Some scheduling things happened, and it became clear that uh that story would be preceded by a couple other issues. And I think this arc during the Doom story is gonna be pretty shocking. And I wanted to take the opportunity of having like previous issues before leading into that, to do a lot of groundwork, uh, so that the choices that he makes when we get to issue 6 will make sense. And his recent experience will be informing that. There's some foreshadowing already, and there's some misdirection already.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I read this the synopsis of issue 6 from the solicit, and which you can see on Marvel's website. And yeah, I was instantly excited, having just read issues 1 through 4. And as someone who doesn't have a lot of history with the comic book version of Tony Stark, I think this, and I've read a few other things, like some of Marvel's like big event series, like Civil War and the like. But I, th- I this version of Tony Stark, I think, is phenomenal.
Thank you.
Um, because we see a Tony who's gotten beaten up. He's just been through essentially hell, and thinks he's getting back on his feet, and then the rug gets pulled out from under him with this, company-wide merger. But yeah, I mentioned the humor in it already. Like there were so funny, more so than I was just expecting. And everyone there, like the scene where he is handed a hot towel and he like
Thank you. Yeah, I
mentions
was
about, is this being poisoned? And then like, I think it's the doctor who's in charge of Roxxon is just like, it's not poisoned. Like there's just all these like little moments that like really are not just funny and kind of break up some of the like little bit of exposition to kind of propel the story forward. But um it really solid writing and like character informing as well. Loved all of those, little moments. Love Tony having to kind of face that he can't like, you know, punch his way, out of it as much as he'd like to try. And I really kind of relish seeing the character like that and come to terms with um that aspect of it, what he was like fighting against. So I thought that was really, really well done.
Well, thanks very much.
What
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, that's go ahead. You can. I don't wanna cut you
No,
off.
no, 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 no. I
People
just
listen to me enough.
no, I thought so. This is, a character who, in universe is one of the richest people alive, one of the most industrious people alive, genius level inventor. Um, it's hard to come up with challenges for someone like that. And I wanted to make it so that we've got, this very big superhero tableau that challenges Iron Man, but Iron Man is put into a position where the old stuff that used to work doesn't work anymore. He gets all of his suits taken away from him,
Yeah.
and so at that point you're kind of, it becomes a strip hero to their essence story. And then if you take all that stuff away from him, he's still this guy. He's still Tony Stark, and there's so much of this guy's character history that takes place in these boardrooms, and then is just sort of like very often, uh, either the company is the villain, or he's got to assert his control over villains taking the company, or the company is something of a backdrop to be ignored, except perhaps in exposition scenes until you get to like him in the Iron Man suit doing stuff. And I wanted to do things
Yeah.
a little bit different and make it so that we've let's not beat around the bush here. Many stories in this guy's character history about losing the company being taken from him, and so on and so forth. Um,
Sure.
and with a launch like this, the mandate is, make it reminiscent of the classics, but don't just sing karaoke. Take it to a kind of different place. And I thought this would be a way of, certainly for like the first arc of a book, orienting people, while showing that we can nod to what's come before, but this is going to go in a pretty significantly different direction.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I've never heard it put that way before, like a nod to the classic, but don't sing karaoke. Like that is yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um uh Sometimes you'll hear creators talk about characters that they, wanted to use but couldn't in terms of if they're being used on other books, like where did you have a lot of freedom in terms of the villains that and the other characters that you got to use to put into the story?
It took some doing. The first 3 issues took a lot of refining. This is the second comic book I've ever written. Um, which is to say also the second fiction project I've ever completed. I'm not a fiction
Okay,
writer.
yeah.
This is
Right.
this is a new skill for me. So I will fully admit to learning as I go. I would not, for the life of me, consider myself um, a master or even really a novice of comic book craft. So I'm just reading my old comics, um, for craft at this point, seeing what works and why, learning a lot about um, space being time, as the saying goes, because you've got 20 pages to tell these stories. Marvel was
Yeah.
very good about letting me play with a lot of both A-list characters and then some deep pulls. Issue 4 has the Scarlet Witch. This is a funny
Yeah.
story. So
Yeah.
like that was not.
That was great when she showed up. I thought that was
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you. And that's a credit to editor Sarah Brunstad, because I knew in issue 4 we needed to have a character who would kind of play the role of kind of a magic expositor in a way that kind of Tony can't. Um, and so first I thought, because I'm an X-Men fan, like, what if it's Ilyana Rasputina, magic? And then that came back, well, she's on a flagship X-Men team, so probably not. And then I thought, well, I'm an Alpha Flight guy. I loved reading Alpha Flight when I was a little kid. What if we had Shaman, the mystic guy from Alpha Flight? And my editor very calmly, very respectfully, gave me a note after a nice pregnant pause, and was like, I think maybe this should be the Scarlet Witch. We can go a little bit bigger than Shaman. Use one of the, A-list, Avenger characters and MCU character. And here I thought, like, I didn't know I could ask for that. I you know,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I
oh,
was
okay,
I was
funny.
I was
Yeah.
trying to set, like, expectations for, like, well, doesn't look like anyone's going to be using shaman from Alpha Flight. So let's see if I can do that. And then she's like, no, you can just take the Scarlet Witch. This should, and when she mentioned it, it's like, yes, that makes a lot more sense. Should be someone with quite an extensive character history with Iron Man. So yeah, that's the right call. And I didn't
Yeah.
know that. So, you might as well ask, and the worst you can hear is no, right? Um, so that's
Sure.
that's that's a little bit of the approach I took. Although sometimes after you hear the no, you might have to kind of wonder, like, where do I recalibrate so I get to a yes the next time?
Right. Your background in journalism and all the work that you've done over your career. You said, you feel like you're not really a fiction writer. This is something you're new and getting into, but how much do you pull from the experiences that you've had and the stories you've covered, to put into a book like Iron Man? I say that because reading issue 4
Yeah.
and like one of the first things I that stood out to me is one of the areas there's a reference to a Hellman Circle or Hellman Square, and I wondered how much that related to the work you did in terms of what is it, Hellman Circle
Hellman Square, yeah. Hellman Square in
oh, I guess
Chicago.
it's
Yeah.
Hellman Circle, yeah,
Hellman Circle in the
in Chicago.
Marvel universe.
Um,
Yeah, Hellman Square in the comics. And I'm sorry, I got that completely wrong. Hellman Square in
okay.
Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, "What?" So that got me thinking in terms of like, how much does that like bleed through? Do you like, oh, I have all these different experiences. I'm dealing, I've written about all these, really important, heavy topics in terms of the things you've covered, and then, um, do you is how do you kind of distill some of that experience for like a comic book audience? Do you have a particular approach or does it just happens?
Like I say, I'm still learning how to do this. So, I get the idea and I see how I can execute without really having like a set group of tricks that, I know how to use yet. If you were to ask me to prepare a piece of journalism, I can chop this up for you in any number of different ways. I understand templates that work. I understand formats that help tell certain kinds of stories and don't work for others. I don't really know that for comics yet. I will freely admit to you. What happened was is we were encouraged to use Ironheart for issues 4 and 5, and that made me think, well, Ironheart is a Chicago character, and I have a certain history with Chicago. And I thought about how that could work as a setting for the story that I needed 4 and 5 to be, knowing
Yeah.
what's coming with 6. And
Oh,
I
okay.
having certain elements, I'm trying to talk around this. Having certain elements in 4 and 5 that will help inform choices that happen um, in 6 and onward. So
Okay.
from there, I wanted to, and then also like, what's a dramatic setting? And I would think a place of enforced disappearances is quite a dramatic setting, and also one that could call attention to some things that happen in the real world that very often get ignored or marginalized, not dealt with, and allowed to fester. Um,
Yeah.
so one of the things that I will tell you, once I knew that I had a way of addressing um, a home and square type of thing in the story, I went back to my reporting on home and square, um, and remembered that the actual physical warehouse where to this day Chicago police hold people in incommunicado detention, don't formally book them yet, do not accordingly have a record of where they are on the outside that family can access and know where their loved one is, that attorneys can walk into.
Yeah.
I
And
remembered that
as an attorney, that's the most shock as an attorney myself, that was like the most shocking when I read that that
yeah,
they were turning like
turn away
defense attorneys
routinely.
away from the building. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry,
And
I'd cut
no,
you
no,
off.
no. No, 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 no. I want people to have that reaction, right? The warehouse complex itself is a vestige of a Sears Roebuck operations center that employed quite a lot of people decades ago on the Chicago West Side. And I wanted to have something in this story, and this will make some more sense when issue 5 is out. Um, that reminds people that it was probably a back when it was his father's company was Stark Industries, a Stark Industries operations center that his dad closed during deindustrialization.
Right.
He never thought of it again because that's, you know, many such examples of behavior by such ultra wealthy people. But for the people who lost their jobs from that and the neighborhood that becomes blighted afterward, they're never going to forget that. That's going to be their impression of the Stark legacy in a place like Chicago forever, because that just
Yeah.
affects so many people's lives. So I wanted to have that in there. So it's not Tony who did that, that's his dad who did it. So he gets a chance also to help kind of redeem somewhat dad's legacy, while also getting this, not to say too much, getting this reminder that the obligations that he has for people that he freely assumes as Iron Man, the superhero, are not limited to his actions as Iron Man, the superhero. But the fact of the matter is, this guy controls what in universe is one of the world's most strategically important corporations. And I wanted to have stuff in this book interrogating what that means for everyone else who has to kind of, you know, catch a cold when Tony Stark sneezes, so to speak.
Yeah. No, that I mean that makes a lot of sense. And I can't wait to see how it continues to, to play out in issue 5, and then, in issue 6 with this like kind of line wide doom event that is taking place with Marvel. So it seems like because you said you were reading the run right before yours that Jerry was writing. Um, were comics like always a part of your life, or was there ever a period of time where were you reading them as a kid and then took a break, and or were you always kind of with a toe in to the waters of comics
Like a lot
as
of
a
people,
fan?
yeah, yeah. Like a lot of people, this was so central to me as a child. Um, uh, I'm in my mid 40s, so this is, me, you know, my mother helped teach me to read, thanks to the Bill Matlow, Sal Buscema Incredible Hulk run. My cousins, when we would go visit them on holidays, um, two of my cousins who were twins had in their room big long boxes of Claremont, Cockrum, Byrne, uh, Cockrum again, Paul Smith, John Romita Jr., X-Men comics. And I would just, completely ignore my family and just read my cousin's comics. And um, then, like a lot of people, you get to be like 13 and 14, and lots of other interests compete for your attention and your money. And so I put comics down for a long time, until probably like my mid 20s, late 20, my yeah, mid late 20s, when, now I was making, my own money, and felt like jumping back into it. I was living in Washington D.C. at the time. I had some roommates who were also comics readers. So I got back into the habit, and then have just sort of stayed with it, and watched as all of these different amazing stories have been told. Didn't think that it would be something that I would ever do, but my work has taken me to a lot of places around the world. Not often because good things are happening. Like I've been to Afghanistan, I've been to Iraq, I've been to Guantanamo Bay, I've been on a variety of naval surface ships, a submarine once. And I would very often think, how would this story that I'm on, play out in the Marvel universe? And I cover the intelligence agencies, I cover the Defense Department, I cover the businesses that contract with both of those entities, and that's one of the reasons you'll see all throughout this book. I think in pretty much every issue, there's like subtly a reference, maybe not so subtly, to Shield and to the legacy of Shield, and to Shield as an
Right.
intelligence enterprise, who that in many ways is tied into the character of Iron Man. Iron Man and Nick Fury have a very long and I would probably safe to say toxic history. Uh, Nick Fury has manipulated Tony Stark a fair amount. And each one of these issues, I guess this also speaks to an earlier question of yours about how I take my work and use it to inform my comic stuff, um, touches on that a bit. And I didn't want to do it in a way that um, is just basically comics talking to earlier iterations of those comics, but just more like, imagine that some of that stuff is a marinade and the story I have is the big like protein that I'm going to grill. And I'm going to stick that marinade, it's going to, infuse into that protein, but the marinade shouldn't be the main thing you taste, right? It should be enhancing the flavor of what you're tasting. And that's kind of the approach I wanted to take with some of that stuff, especially the stuff that's in my personal background as a writer.
I was really, and I just think it's so well done how you've kind of taken all of these things, taken that marinade and and used it to kind of enhance these stories. And then I think being paired up with Julius is just like one. It's amazing, and Alex Sinclair, the pages where Tony, is kind of like under the spell of Dr. Druid, and you kind of see kind of Tony being haunted by these things with references to like key like Iron Man stuff. Those pages were like blew me away.
Just incredible. And, you know, Julius Ohta is someone who I believe is going to be a huge name in comics art. Uh, I'm very lucky to have been strapped to his rocket ship for my first Marvel work. What can you say about Alex Sinclair? He invented comic book coloring on computers. Like I was lucky enough at New York Comic Con to get to have dinner with him and hear his stories about literally being, 19, 20, and working at Homage Studios, eventually Wildstorm, and learning like Illustrator 2, like the earliest days of how to do this on computers. And
Yeah.
he bent the comic book. I mean, he wasn't the only one, but he was a part of that original crew, um, that basically bent the direction of the medium into like his direction. Comics coloring has never been the same, and just getting to be around someone like that is incredibly enriching and inspiring. And then you'll notice when there is that freaky Dr. Druid scene, and then we have our pages from that kind of reference the famous demon in the bottle um story that dealt with Tony's alcoholism. um
Right.
he goes back to a very like stipple dot matrix 1970s 80s style coloring
Yeah.
pattern. Just blew me
It's
away. Like
incredible. Yeah.
like the subtle,
It's so
like the
good.
subtlety, not everyone thinks in those terms, and like that's
Yeah.
when you're in the presence of a genius who's mastered his craft. And I'll always be grateful and consider myself lucky that I got to work with both of these guys.
that's fantastic. Yeah, those pages are, are great. And so when you're writing these issues, because you're, not used to fiction writing as you've said, um, do you find it in any way, like, difficult to write, like, the actual, like, battle fight scenes? Like, are you, like, tightly scripting those? Are you leaving that more so up to Julius Ohta as the artist in terms of, like, the paneling? And as these issues went on, did you feel, like, more comfortable kind of having more of a direction in, like, the choreography of the action scenes?
So I do some fairly tight fight choreography, panel by panel. Um, just because like when you do the like, I don't know if this is everybody, but like the approach I try and take is, you're doing rising and falling action in these fight scenes. It's not just, punching and punching and punching. Um,
Yeah.
it's storytelling and it's characterization. And given the realities of, your hard limit 20-page comic book, you really want to use those fight scenes for that and also for spectacle. And um, early on, when we got paired up, I asked Julius what does he like to draw and what does he hate to draw and what kind of script does he want to be receiving.
Right.
And my approach is, the script is a template. There are certain things that I will make clear in the script have to be on panel, but at all times, when you come up with a better idea, do that and I'll write around it. Like, I don't think that I can better visually convey an idea than Julius Ohta. I would be an absolute fool if I thought that. And I would rather
Right.
have the page that Julius is most like excited to draw come back to me different from how I scripted it. And then, Stanley called scripting over finished art like doing a crossword puzzle. And I really feel that. Like that's a pretty apt thing. Like, there is, and I feel this is exciting. I found it exciting because it was so new, it was so different from my experience of writing. You have almost like poetry, this rhythm and this structure imposed upon you that forces an incredible economy of expression. And you should just go with that and let the artwork guide a revision of panel dialogue and so forth. Sometimes, expressions, uh, some you'll without giving too specific an example, there were times where I rewrote dialogue because the expressions shown on the page just did not have the tone that I had them in the script. And I'm not going to
Okay.
tell Julius go back and redraw a page because it doesn't match like the subtle banter and repartee and conversational design of the script. I'd rather just rescript around what he draws. And I feel like that's made both of us able to do something that I didn't know I would want until I started writing comics, which is the freedom to work something out on the page. Which is to say, I go in scripting, I know what the major beats are. I don't know what I don't totally know, and I don't really know at all until I start writing, like, really how this is gonna shake out. I have to see whether, a scene is good for 3 page turns, if it's good for 2, if it's good for only 1, um, and write for those page turns. Um, I get the joy of working that out on the page. The last thing I wanna do is take that away from Julius. I want Julius to be able to work it out on the page and see what's working for him and what's not. And I have a conversation with him, before scripting, so it's not so, like, his ideas can be represented so that if I'm doing something that he's not too thrilled about, then we can brainstorm a better idea and so on and so forth. So it's not just like I am the guy who's building this story and then I'm giving it to him to do the actual hard work. I want to make sure that, for a visual medium, this starts out with a major component of visual storytelling baked in based on the desires of the artist that I'm working with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I also wanted to ask, just from, I think, fair to say, like, one comic book nerd to another. I hope that's not offensive. I
It's
mean
not
it in a
offensive in the
positive way.
slightest. I understand, my friend.
So we've, talking about the story and how your work has influenced it, and the difference between the stuff you've done in journalism and then writing comic books, but just on a pure fun level. How great was it the first time you saw those pages come in with Tony and that big freaking sword?
So incredible. The sword, the sword, the sword is. I want to make this so clear. The sword was not my idea. I didn't think of that. I'm not, I do not think in terms of giant anime swords, but Julius Ohta does.
Oh,
And when we
it's
were
so good.
and when we were having that conversation where it started out with me asking him, "What do you love to draw and what do you prefer not to draw?" Among the things he came back with was like, "I love, really big anime swords. Is there any way, at all?" And I think he wasn't even necessarily being super serious because, like, it's not what the character really does. He's like, "Is there any way we could maybe do that for Iron Man?" And, like, I froze for a moment because I was like, "I don't have any idea how to do that." Like, I have the major plot beats for the first 3 issues because I needed to get that approved, before
Yeah.
we moved forward, and none of that had to do with the sword. And then I was just like, "No, fuck it, we're doing the sword." Like, that's obviously the right call. Like, you want to do this. It's something we haven't really seen with the character. It would look amazing. That's
Oh,
exciting.
no, it does. It's so unexpected when it happens, and, when when it's, like, all there, like, on the page, it just looks so cool. It's
And
like,
just wait,
yeah.
just wait. There Wait until you see this sword in issue 6. Wait until you
Oh,
see this sword in issue 7. Like, it's so I didn't think I could be this excited about a sword, and who knew?
yeah.
I'll tell you, I the first arc I pitched as how to blow up a pipeline meets Succession, and when now suddenly there's this idea that, like, hell yeah, we're gonna do a giant anime sword. I had to go back and think, like, what thematically makes sense to explain this sword? How can we make this not just like an add-on, but something that's part of, like, the heart of what the story is? And I
Yeah.
knew that, in issue 2, I guess this comic has been out for a while, but it's not, you know, spoilers. Iron Man blows up an oil pipeline. And then I was like, what if we took the shards of an oil pipeline and turned it not into a plowshare, my friend, but into a giant anime sword that Julius Ohta will. j- Can I just say, when you're looking at that sword, look at all and this is the case for the armor as well, but look at all the gear work on that. There's so much
No, it's
detail that
incredible.
he has put into, like, I can see this thing retracting and moving and, like, generating energy through, like, I love it. It's the design is so incredible, and the joy of this collaboration is that I simply never would have thought of.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's so good. And yeah, even the suit that he has, it's has almost, like, not quite, but, like, maybe a little bit of, like, a steampunk kinda, like,
No,
look
that's it.
to it,
That's
like,
it, yeah. It's a
and,
steampunk armor.
then the line that I love that's worked into it when it's kinda, I think it's the same, I think it's this, I don't know, maybe it's not the same scene where with the hot towel and the poison comment, but, I think it's the same character who says to him, "A little more leather than you're used to wearing." Like, there's, like, those little side comments, like, worked in, like, about it, I just thought were just very unexpected, I felt like every one of them like worked and landed. Yeah, I
Thank you.
mean,
One of the
it's
things that
such a
I
fan.
Thank you so much. One of the things that I did not realize until I came onto this book, and no one ever put it in these terms for me. So this is me kind of inferring a bit, but Iron Man is a fashion book. It's a fashion book probably for people who are not like used to reading a lot of lookbooks or seeing a lot of lookbooks. I certainly am not.
Okay.
But the emphasis that both the character history, the fan base has, and like what a lot of suggestions I was getting back from editorial was like plan some armor iterations that will allow Julius to stretch his design legs and like peg them to like particular covers that we can start like what issues will we see new armor developments with. I was like, wow. In addition to coming up with this story, in addition to coming up with, particular characterization plots, this also kind of has to be a lookbook. And I just embraced that. And yeah, we should want to get, our boy, as the saying goes, having that shit on.
Yeah. Yeah. Man,
Iron
that's
Man
funny.
has that
I didn't
shit
think of that.
on. I'm telling you.
Yeah, he does.
He's
I
got
didn't
it
think of it
on.
as like a lookbook, but it is true with all the different armors that pop up.
Yeah, and one of the things I've noticed from the fandom is like the fandom really likes like, you know, this armor is someone's favorite, that armor is someone's favorite. And, when I would write it in to this script, there would be a lot of places, especially in the first issue where you see like tons of different armors. I was just like, in this panel, just draw your favorite armors. What armor is he wearing when, we start issue 1? What's your favorite armor? And then
Yeah.
we were like, actually, let's make it your second favorite armor because we want to have him in more of your favorite armor for most of issue 1 after something happens to that armor at the start of issue 1. And then something's going to happen to that armor by the end of issue 1. And then we're going to be kind of off into our own world.
Yeah, that's so funny. Think of it as a lookbook, but it is true with all the different types of armor. Yeah, I just, you know, I'm really enjoying. I'm glad I'm doing this. For March and like kind of spreading out. Finally starting to make my way through some of the current Marvel books because I am like I'm absolutely loving it, and I mean I'm excited for for issue 5. I'm excited for issue 6. I'm gonna have to start reading more of the line and the tie-ins, but I'm all on board for Iron Man and whatever comes next. I loved it, Spencer. It was so good.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. That's really gratifying. This has been a dream come true. I never thought I would have any Marvel work, let alone to get to work on a character as prestigious and as tentpole as Iron Man is. So I just hope I can, for whatever time I have on the book, leave an impression.
Well, you've definitely done that with me, you and Julius, and Alex and Joe,
Yeah,
the entire
the
team.
whole team is really just killer. I'm so grateful to be working with them.
Yeah, I think it's great, and I am very excited for what comes next. So, yeah, I'll be getting ready in February. I think February 25th is when issue 5 comes out. But if you're listening to this podcast the day it comes out, then today is Tuesday, March 11th, and you can go to your local comic book shop tomorrow, March 12th, and you will be able to get issue 6 of Iron Man, the Insurgent Iron Man. It's the Stark Insurgent prologue. It kicks off a new arc. And if you have not been reading Iron Man, that's okay. You can go tomorrow and get issue 6 and just jump right in. But I'm telling you, you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't go back and see if your local shop had issues 1 to 5, or, you get them digitally, get them however you get your comic books. Because it's worth seeing Tony with the big sword. It's worth seeing how funny the book is as well. And I think you're gonna have a really good time with it. And yeah, so Spencer, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, if anyone is not familiar with Spencer's, journalistic work, please go to Forever Wars. Just Google Spencer Ackerman and check out some of the amazing stories that he has worked on and that he has covered throughout, I think, a 20-year career in journalism. So you definitely do that. And uh, yeah, thank you so much, Spencer. This is really, I hope you had a nice time. This has really been a pleasure.
I had a blast. Thank you, Jimmy. I'm really gratified, especially that you find the book funny.
I just really enjoyed it. Every time that the Iron GPT just cracked me up. I just
Thank
thought
you.
it was really good.
Really appreciate that.
Well, listeners, find me on Blue Sky or TikTok or the website. Let me know what it is you're reading, especially if you're going to check out Iron Man. Let me know what you think. I'd love to talk about it more. And yeah, shout out to my brother Bobby, the Cryptic Creator Corner's #1 most dedicated fan. Bobby listens to all the episodes, and he's very excited that I'm doing Marvel March because he is a Marvel fan, and now we finally have more comic books to talk about. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you to my guest, Spencer Ackerman. Have a good night, everybody, and I will see you next time.
This is Byron O'Neill, one of your hosts of the Cryptic Creator Corner, brought to you by Comic Book Yeti. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast. Please rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It lets us know how we're doing, and more importantly, how we can improve. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner, maybe you would enjoy our sister podcast, Into the Comics Cave. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.